Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Naana Otoo-Oyortey, and it's really exciting to be here. At this time of the day, everybody is tired, and so I just hope that I'll be able to keep you on till we get to the last. So, yes. I'm really going to look at what we have found in terms of Forward's experience. I know today has been an exciting day. I just hope that I'm getting the right buttons. Where are the right buttons? Okay. So yes, about Forward. Forward is an African women-led charity. We've been around. This year we celebrate our 40th birthday, so really excited to be celebrating with Asian Women's Resource Center. Our focus primarily is looking at the pillars around partnerships, prevention and protection, and provisioning of key services. What I'm going to focus about is, and I know it's been really a good conversation around harmful practices, so I really want to just also bring the caveat that my work is going to really look at FGM. The evidence on good practice on FGM indicates that a holistic approach is based on systems, community, individuals, as well as services. And I know we've been talking a lot about what needs to be done, but I think we need to acknowledge that it's a holistic approach. So it's not just only looking at health, we're looking at all the other elements that make it happen. Harmful practices, they are very fueled by the invisible powers that shape the social norms, the practices, the culture, the behavior, and we've just been hearing about behavior and beliefs. These harmful practices are really what we need to sort of unpack, and a lot of times we don't really have time to unpack these practices. It really also looks at the estimates of risk in the UK. We always talk about estimates of risk. What does it really mean? It may be overestimated due to lack of effective data. We really don't have data. A lot of the data that we are quoting is really from 2015. Nobody has done a really in-depth data in terms of what the evidence is. So we need to be really careful. Current safeguarding and legal frameworks are actually insufficient to look at the issue of risk. So we need to also look at that, and particularly the impact of the laws on other people. So for example, reluctance of girls to access FGM-related services. Girls under 18, because of mandatory reporting, will not go for services. What do we do about these girls who are missing? I had a harrowing call from Forward. The first time an intern came to Forward, and she had a call, and the girl said, I'm calling from home, I've had an FGM, I'm going to be forced into marriage. I really cannot go for services, I'm not allowed to go. And actually, I'm calling because now nobody's at home. I got the Forward number and hid it under a carpet. That's how I managed to call. She called 2 times, and by the time the girl had listened to her call, she was crying. I was trying to console her because she just took it, she was shocked, and that was the only time that this girl could call somebody. So we know that a lot of girls are also suffering. How do we reach these girls? And this is the crux of the matter for me. Age at which FGM is being done is changing globally. We need to look at global evidence, because what happens globally also happens here. And we know that yes, FGM is reducing in countries of origin, there's been data, but we also know that numbers are going up. But most importantly, we know that younger and younger girls are going through FGM. So by the time before somebody would be at 14 years, now she's doing that at 1 year or 2 years. How do you know? So we need to also look at these nuances in terms of the changes, particularly the newly arrived. And persistent feeling by African communities of being suspected, and I think some of these things, I love what was said by the Hackney guy about, looking at the particular protective and not blanketing everybody. So that's something that we really need to look. And repeatedly singled out by communities really means that communities feel punished, and we need to look at that. I want to share some insights from the research that we've done. This was research with young women, research with men, and I think men is almost always a missing thing when we come to talking about these issues. Unfortunately, there's very little money to work with men, because most of the focus is on girls, most of the focus is on women, and most of the focus is particularly on services. So we see that the men are left out. And when it comes to gatekeepers and comes to social norms, it comes to religious leaders, they are the crux of the matter. We cannot work without men. So how do we sort of bring men on the table? And for this is a wake-up call. It was a participatory study done in Bristol where women talked about the experience of walking through the FGM journey. I'm going to really focus on some research we've done with Bristol, and this was participatory research. We engaged 24 women and 15 men from African communities primarily, whilst Up Forward works with BME communities. African communities seem to also be our main focus. We had focus group discussions. There were also interviews with statutory professionals and local authority leaders. I want to share some of the quotes from this research because I think it's important. Safeguarding mandatory reporting in schools. What's the research that we know? What's the evidence that we know? And when we're looking at good practice, we need to be really clear about good practice. And I think this research really shed a lot of light. There are huge problems in the way the FGM mandatory reporting duty is implemented because there isn't enough understanding of people. There is also the fact that to report with any sort of good knowledge, people don't have good understanding. I've been hearing about a lot of the talking about training. Do we have any standards around training? Anybody gets up and is a trainer? Who really does training? And we've been talking repeatedly about standards of training. It's never happened. Nobody is interested in putting in effort. So everybody comes, oh, I'm an expert. You go for training one day, I'm an expert. You know, what does it really mean? So we really have to be clear what we want in terms of what works and what doesn't really work. Without standardized training, we can't hold people accountable. So we have to be really clear around the standards. And this is a local councillor. They've acknowledged that. You haven't committed a crime. They don't need to come to your house and make you feel like you're a criminal in front of your children. A lot of people get stressed because of that. And there were situations where there's been evidence or there's been a talk of somebody being at risk. They definitely come to your house. They look at you, the children, and say, police are in your house. We had this case in Bristol where, you know, a woman died, her children died. There were so many, the way they approached was very much stigmatizing. So we need to be clear about what works and what doesn't work. I want to really share the observed things that we have. The concerns that the report made to the police were often unsubstantiated and influenced by bias, particularly in terms of who the communities were. Families are forced to face complex legal processes after a report. No support, nothing. And these are families who may also be very vulnerable. Unlike Africa, the case where you have some kind of rich families, most of the families that we are seeing are families who really, really are vulnerable. Professionals are concerned that having a mandatory reporting duty only for FGM risk stigmatizing particularly communities. Many families were referred to social services based only on their holiday plans or the fact that their daughters had frequent visits to the bathroom. So a lot of times it's like, what is the evidence that we're using? Schools are supposed to do their own risk assessments, but again, we are talking, we don't have uniform risk assessments. What does risk assessment mean? So if we are having different risk assessments, how do we then make sure that what is being done in one area is the same as what's being done in the other area? Again, there isn't oversight. So we really need to look at that. I won't read all this, but these are the experiences that we are seeing in the communities, and we really need to work with them. Community focus is so central. This was a study that was done by the young people, and it was part of our Young Women's Leadership Program. And we did a research which was actually not only in UK, but in Europe. I think the fact that I'm part of the diaspora and I don't live in Somalia, it also gives me a privilege. So I'm able to say, I hate FGM. I think it's wrong, it's disgusting, but also the fact that that young woman can actually be an advocate for change. How do we work with young women who can be advocates? In our research, the study found that there was a general awareness of FGM among the interview participants, which was great because we actually seen even the evidence. So there's a lot going on in terms of training on FGM, much more than the other forms of harmful practices. The participants had learned about the practice through a range of ways. Several participants remembered FGM being discussed in schools. Some also said their families. Some women have also learned that FGM through their families with the participants' mother, who definitely played a key role. So mothers, education of mothers becomes critical. Mothers' experiences sometimes can actually help to break the cycle. And I do remember there have been a number of campaigners who didn't go through FGM because the mothers had saved them. So let's not victimize the families or vilify communities, but see them also as advocates for change, because we can work with them. Participant identity formed a part of their perceptions of FGM. The other thing I want to also talk about is at the community level. As if I don't know how many minutes, 5 minutes, good. The role of community champions, I think we need to look at that. For us, communities are the key to change. With FGM, once a mother has finished the cycle of FGM with her and doesn't go to her daughter, very often that cycle can be broken. And so how do we make sure that that cycle is broken and kept? We worked a lot with community champions as Forward. We've trained over 400 community champions who lead on our community outreach and engagement. A number of us Forward, our community workers, have come through this. African and migrant women are recruited from often partner organizations. We worked around the country. I recall some of the work we did in places like Birmingham and Manchester. We do 8 weeks transformative leadership training. It's with 8 weeks, sometimes twice a week, women come in. It adopts a gender transformative approach. So addressing gender issues, addressing justice issues, addressing rights, empowerment is so critical to being changed. They are trained to conduct participatory research, and also champions can access self-care, because one of the things that we see importantly is the impact of FGM in women. Their work is to work as community mediators. They have representation on issues, sometimes for women. They also see themselves as change makers within their communities and are recognized. The most important for them is advocating for other women. During the COVID period, these women were fantastic in terms of how they advocated and worked with other women, calling them, befriending them, and doing a number of support. They also work as leaders and mentors to their families and to their colleagues. And finally, they provide support. And a lot of the support, saying language, being able to do referencing. So this was a rushed presentation. So I just want to really leave you with some interesting summary. We need to invest in community champions. Very often communities are othered. We don't see them as part of the conversations. Even with professionals training, bring in community advocates. They make a huge difference. Very often we don't engage them. Those who engage community advocates see the value of it. So incentivize also participation for these communities, because very often these women don't have, their time is important, but they're only brought in as volunteers. Whereas other people can volunteer. A lot of community people volunteering is at expense. So we have to also think about volunteering. There's always volunteering. Yeah, it's okay for other communities, but for a lot of vulnerable women, volunteering is very, very problematic. Community education is important. Dialogue, media engagement helps change the attitudes and beliefs that we've been talking about. One-to-one engagement, but also creating spaces. Strengthen support systems. How do we strengthen, prioritize, particularly those who are also working at the community level? And I really love the fact that we're also talking about trauma with professionals. There's also trauma with women who deal with these issues, particularly with community advocates. We need to also think about being fair and using the same kind of fairness and supporting volunteers and things. Standardized training, I've already mentioned it. Without that, we can't move forward. Invest in evidence generation. How do we invest in evidence? Implement systems for monitoring and evaluation. We're talking about all these programs. Where is the evidence of change? Where is the evidence of what works? And so I leave you with this, that we need to really put these kids into our work. Thank you.